your audible sighs.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to light some Palo Santo and welcome everyone to the show. Welcome to the Amy Edwards Show. I'm your host, Amy Edwards, and we're doing it live today. I'm so excited because I haven't done one live in a while, and the energy is always so good when you do it live. You know, I mean, so let's all breathe in for a minute and welcome. And I hope you're just doing great and life is kicking ass and you're here. And we've been involved in this sort of sex series that I didn't even see coming. Susan Bratton and Samantha Charles and now Leola today. So we're just getting a really good dose of tuning back into our sexuality and in the most beautiful way. And so such a foundational part of our lives, and so it deserves this attention. So I'm just thrilled that you're here and thrilled that we're all like, showing up and paying attention to it. So yay. I know. Right.
You have this like sexy summer theme.
Because
it was last year that you did.
Yes, it was. And you were a guest.
I was a guest.
You might have even kicked off the whole series. I can't remember. I think you might have. And so everybody, I'm welcoming our guest today, the absolutely stunning Leola. And you are such a queen, intimacy mentor and pleasure priestess. And now author.
Ta-da.
Oh my God. Sacred Sex Ed. If you're watching, I hope you can see this gorgeous book. Your taste level is always so stunning. And I'm guessing this is why you wore red today.
I did.
Is this for your press tour? You're in red?
Yep. We're wearing red.
As somebody who wears purple, like to everything I do, I'm so here for it. Cause I think that colors really matter. What does red symbolize to you besides like love, I guess, but.
Yeah, love, life, blood, the alchemy, roses. I don't know. And I also, the back is blue too. So I also feel like it's this great mash of feminine, masculine, fire, water, duality, polarity, and then the union into divinity.
I love that. Who designed your cover? It's really beautiful.
Thank you. I found an artist who's based in Poland, and I'm actually Polish, but I found her on Reedsy, which is like a platform for artists to find editors and cover artists. And yeah, she's great. We had so many different variations. I almost went with a pink cover. She did a really great pink cover, but I wanted it to be gender neutral because this is not just for women, this book, it's for everybody. So I went with red.
I love that it's for everybody. Yeah. And this is such who you are, Sacred Sex Ed. I feel like this is what you teach anyway. So the name must have come kind of naturally.
It did. Right? It did. So many of the things that I name, I feel like it just comes through me. I don't know. I mean, and a lot of the book, especially the first part of the book is about illuminating your shadows. Ooh. So addressing the inherent, sexual shadows, sexual trauma that we all receive. Mm-hmm. It's my belief that we all have some level of sexual trauma just growing up in the Western world because our religion is very, can be traumatizing in the way that it speaks about sexuality, our sex education in school as well.
Yes. That's traumatic in itself.
Yeah. I know that you're an amazing mom and probably the sexual education that you provided your children is, very progressive and sacred in a way, but many of us didn't have that. Mm-mm. And so the first part of the book is addressing like, hey, this was maybe your sexual education. This might've been how you learned about, sex from your peers, from your parents, wherever. And it probably was fear-based and it was probably not addressing pleasure and it was probably not as empowering as it could be and maybe some honesty, but also a lot of fear-mongering mixed in. And so can we have this, empowering, honest, and pleasure-based, sacred sexual education?
Big time.
And that's what the book is.
Big time. And a lot of times my kids don't want to talk about it, but it is nice to provide resources that are new, that explain it in a whole different way. Yeah. I know with my parents, it was more like they left some books on a bottom shelf for me to find.
And for you to find.
Yeah. And I did, of course. Yeah. And I think I didn't realize it was intentional at the time, but it wasn't like I could talk to them about it. Yeah. And so there wasn't this sense of openness and talking about it. And, you are a good example of talking about it, as am I. You know,
course.
we're willing to talk about, that's everybody's showing up, right? That's why I was congratulating people, because like we got to keep talking about it. And that's part of what starts this conversation around the difference of what we've been taught by society and what really can make a difference in our lives.
Yeah, it's edgy to bring this conversation to the world and for you to bring this conversation to the leader, to your listeners. I mean, you are such an advocate for the betterment of the world just in your own like being and the projects and the things that you're involved in. And then you've also created this incredible platform to talk about things that might be taboo or edgy or, you know, uncomfortable, but bringing it in a really playful and also like open-minded, compassionate way. And I'm just so appreciative.
Thank you.
To be included in that.
I received that.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. It's taken some, you know, work for me to get there because I wasn't really raised that way. Like I was saying, it wasn't something we talked about, but I always wanted that for my kids. And so I was like, you just got to do it, you know, learn more and keep learning and just, it's a part of life that's so foundational to who we are as humans.
Yeah, it's the energy that brought us into the world. Like we're all here because of sex. So if your relationship
somebody was fucking, okay?
Yeah, somebody did something. That's all I'm saying. But yeah, so if your relationship to sexuality is marred or it feels contracted, then that's going to show up in, you know, every area of your life. And it will also, impact future generations. As we heal our sexual shadow, our relationship to our sexuality, we liberate ourselves, and we're also liberating, you know, future generations in the process. There's a study by the National Justice Reference System. I believe that's the institution.
I'll go with it. It's good. It works for me.
But they found that, you know, perpetrators of sexual violence were 10 times more likely to have been, you know, have been a victim in the past of some kind of sexual trauma or sexual assault. And if you think about, you know, our sexual education very often being inherently traumatizing, it's like that is exponentially increasing the potential numbers of people that might find themselves in that place of, you know, consciously or unconsciously becoming a perpetrator. And even in the book, I talk about, you know, there's been times where I didn't know, but I was coercing someone sexually and just really wanted, you know, pleasure and desire. And I didn't have the tools to communicate and to, you know, make invitations that were, you know, authentic and in integrity.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Oh my God, was it more hindsight and you were like, shit?
Yeah, ooh, like, you know what? I could have done that better. Like I could have, and I think that that's the thing with like the Me Too movement. I think that not holistically, but a lot of the time it's like, you know, people don't have the tools to ask for consent and people don't have the tools to say no. They don't feel comfortable setting boundaries, especially women, because we're very often, you know, conditioned to keep the peace and go with the flow. And then it's also in our genetic makeup to want to survive. And so we'll often like fawn or freeze. And just like, you know, if we're in a situation where we're feeling pressured sexually or, you know, more legitimately being potentially even raped, it's like our body is like, I just need to survive this. And so we kind of go into shutdown. And that's also addressed in the book, like how to be aware of what are your trauma responses and maybe what are other people's trauma responses so you can understand and begin to have more compassion for yourself and the people around you as well.
I know. I can really relate to that personally too, of just getting worn down in the moment, you know, if you say no and someone keeps asking. I can think of one time in college and finally I gave up, you know, and I hate that, but I have compassion for myself in that moment because I just wanted it to be over, you know? And
same.
Oh, that hurts my heart to talk about it, but it's true. And then, you know, I hope that guy has more awareness around it now. And, you know, and I know I do, and I understand myself better, but if we can all have these conversations, I mean, that's a big part of why I do it. And luckily the children that I'm raising are very, you know, loud and strong. I mean, they're like, they're not afraid to speak up, and it's such a difference than who I was. And I'm so glad. Yeah. And I think my mom, who actually was sexually abused, would probably be really glad. Yeah. You know? even though it wasn't something she talked about.
Yeah, we're making massive strides in a positive direction. Again, just even being able to have this conversation and it go on the internet and it be, you know, relatively normal is powerful. And, you know, the thing is, when it comes to sexuality, so many of us have been told to fear these parts of ourselves, to feel that our desires are bad or wrong. And so we end up just like putting it in the back seat, like not paying attention. And that's how we think that we're going to create safety, by just kind of shoving it to the side, like not addressing it. When in reality, we create safety in our sexuality, in our desires, in our sexual expression by mastering it. And that's what, you know, this movement is really about. It's about, let's bring all of this into the light. Let's find safe ways, safe and consensual ways to explore all that we are.
Have you noticed springing up? Well, you're in this world anyway, but I feel like there's a lot more about what you just said, like tons of materials that people can turn to.
Yep. And I feel like
Is it trending?
I think we're definitely, like, people are still really triggered about it. People are still, you know, and it depends on where you're at. I feel like in Austin, it's such a, you know, I think you can be topless downtown in Austin, right?
It's like, legal.
Not that nudity is inherently sexual, but, you know, when we heal our relationship to our bodies and what our bodies do, including sex, it's, you know, it's all related.
Right.
So
it is. Okay. So let's talk about your book. Illuminate your shadows, expand your awareness, and liberate your eros. I love liberation. Liberate is one of my favorite words, I think. I was just listening to Michael Singer, and he was talking about when you're really operating from a space of love and the freedom that provides and the liberation. And that's what even talking about sex did for me. Like, it's extremely liberating.
it is. Yeah.
I love that you chose that word. What do you think? Well, this has a lot of words. How many words is your book?
I think it's like 60,000.
That's pretty good.
Words.
Good size.
You know, the funny thing too is, though, I wrote this a year ago, like a little bit more than a year ago, about a year and a half ago.
Really?
Yeah, I did. But it's, I mean, you've published books too, right?
I have.
It's like, I wrote it in about 3 months, and then the editing process, I like needed to take a break from it. And then I started editing, and I didn't realize how many times I was going to have to edit it, and how many people, like I had test readers read it. And so like that process took way longer than I thought. So finally now it's about a little bit more than a year after I finished writing it. And like, I want to add more. Like at this point, I'm like, there's so many more things that I could add to this book. But at a certain point, you just have to say, baby is ready.
Yeah.
And she's coming out, and there will be more books.
What was liberating for you in writing this?
You know, it's a very honest book.
It sounds like what you just said about like evaluating your past.
Yeah, there's a lot of that
behavior.
Yeah, there's a lot of personal anecdotal stories in this book. There's a lot of, hey, like I've messed up, and here's what I've learned, and here's what it's worked for my clients, and here's how we transform these things. You know, my sex education was like, you know, very fear-based and minimal as well. And so I learned about sexuality by just going out in the world and exploring. And that put myself in and having very little empowering information.
Yeah.
So that put me in a lot of, you know, dangerous situations, unfortunately. But that's how I learned. And so I write about all those things in the book. And so it's really vulnerable. And as I was writing it, to put, you know, it all in one place, and to understand like how relatable this is probably going to be for people. And also, yeah, like, I mean, I had one test reader say like, this is so honest. Like, I can't believe how honest
really
you were in this. And that's what I'm leaning into, that it's like, I could totally have people that really like are called out in this or called forth. But it's liberating to know that like it's all out there. Like this is my truth. I'm wearing my heart on my sleeve, and I'm hoping that the information and the lessons that I've learned are going to be so helpful for other people.
To own your own story is very liberating.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
It really is.
Owning my story.
And just getting really deep and honest and just be like, ooh, this is tough to say, but here it is. And then you're suddenly like, I just flexed that muscle and made it a little stronger. And is this something that like a school could use as a textbook?
You know, I don't think that the modern school would take this in, but you know, I'm not a parent yet either. So I think that that's one of the things that I just have to say that's like, I would give this to like my 14-year-old and I feel like I would feel really good about. Maybe not like an 8 or 9-year-old, but you know, a young adult. I feel like this is like a good read for young adult. And I would say like parents read it first, you know, and I address in the book that like, hey, take what works for you and leave the rest. This is a journey for you to find what sexual empowerment and liberation means to you. Because my version is very expressed and I'm on Instagram and I feel comfortable being naked and I go to play parties. I'm not like super poly and open. That's like a whole other intense end of the spectrum. But sexual liberation can look much more celibate even, or, you know, chaste in a way. But it's just finding what works for you. You know, Tantra itself is about expansion and liberation. That's a very broad, like what's liberating to one person is going to be very different to the other. And this is just like not even a template of one way. It's like, here are a bunch of different perspectives that you could look at this from and what's going to work for you. And that's especially what the second part of the book is about, which is about expanding your awareness. So let's talk about, you know, intentional intimacy. Let's talk about different types of sex. Let's talk about different relating styles, and just get curious about, hey, what would feel good for you in this season, in this chapter of life, and also giving yourself permission to evolve as well.
What do you mean when you say intentional intimacy?
What I mean by intentional intimacy is going into intimacy without necessarily a goal or an expectation, or bringing in your past or your education or conditioning, and approaching it from massive curiosity, openness, seeing just what's available for me in this moment, and having some blueprints of what that could look like. So for example, one chapter of the book talks about the 4 types of sex. Can we go into that?
Please.
Does that sound good? Okay.
Tell me more.
Yes. So before I knew about the 4 types of sex, I thought that there was like good sex and bad sex.
Sure.
And most of my sex at that point, or even before, was bad sex. Just because I didn't even know what was, like, I didn't know what was an option. And I also didn't know how to communicate my boundaries. I didn't know what I really wanted. I was afraid to even think about what I really wanted because so many desires and kinks are so taboo and made to be wrong or judged. So by default, I was having mostly bad sex just because I didn't know what was there and I didn't know how to communicate what I wanted and also uphold my sacred no's as well. So once I started to practice Tantra and sacred sexuality and explore more, I started to notice that I consistently had good sex, like better sex, but I didn't really have like the words to put on like what it was really creating for me. And then I went to ISTA, which is a shamanic sexuality school, and they identify 4 main types of sex: reproductive, recreational, restorative, and transformational. So reproductive sex is exactly what it sounds like. It's like, you know, sex for making babies.
Yes.
And I think that that's the type of sex that overall is the most okay in the world. Like that's like societally acceptable. It's accepted by religion, etc. Then you have recreational sex, which is like just for fun, feels good for the orgasm. And it's often very goal oriented as well. So it's like, let's get to the orgasm. Let's get as much pleasure, you know, as fast as we can. And I think that that's the type of sex that's the most like commonly sought out.
Yeah.
And then you have restorative sex. And restorative sex is the type of sex that leaves you feeling better after. It's better for your well-being. In some way, it's healing you on some level, whether it be physically, mentally, emotionally, you know, spiritually. And do you feel like you've had this type of sex? Do you know kind of what I'm talking about? Yeah, like it's life-giving. It feels good in your body. You know, I've had it like times where like I feel a headache coming on and I'll be like, let me just like maybe masturbate and see if that will clear it. And it has.
Wow. I love that.
That's like a more physical example. But, you know, there are times too where like, you know, when you just like cry during sex, like it's, you know, when you think about it, our bodies are lodging and holding all of this emotion, this energy in motion. It gets trapped, emotion. The Body Keeps the Score talks about this amazingly. Becoming Supernatural is another book that, you know, talks about this amazingly. But what those books don't address is how sexuality and sex can actually heal some of that and help you release some of that stuck dense emotion, because you're incorporating sound, breath, and movement, which are the three main tools that these books do talk about that help move that dense, stuck emotion. And, you know, you're also, you know, if you look at the more spiritual side of things, you're also activating your Kundalini energy, and that's like cleansing and clearing. So, you know, very often you'll have restorative sex because that energy is moving, it's releasing, you know, maybe stuck anger, sadness, grief, and that brings up tears and it opens your heart and it's restorative.
Totally.
So that's another version. And then you also have transformational. So transformational intimacy is the kind of intimacy where it changes the way you perceive your reality, which is super juicy. Yeah. And this can look so many different ways. It can also be the type of sex that like, oh my God, you're crying and you have this big breakthrough. But it could also be just trying something new, you know, trying something new, maybe exploring intimacy with someone of the same gender, or maybe trying like a new kink that you'd always been curious about and finding yourself liking it or even not liking it and learning something about yourself, you know, in the process.
I think anytime we move past fear too of the way we've perceived it or what we've been told, that's transformational. We're getting out of our comfort zone, and like that would count, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So once you understand, okay, there's a menu that I can choose off of, right? And that is inherently empowering. That gives you the opportunity to say like, oh, I really would benefit from a more restorative experience or a more transformational experience. And I'll also say that intimacy doesn't need to fit into one of these four. It could be all four, or it could be two of four. Like when I do decide to conceive, which is, you know, on the horizon, I don't want to just have reproductive sex. I don't want to feel just like an animal that's, you know, I want it to be transformational as well, you know, or at very least recreational and reproductive. So the invitation in understanding these types of intimacy is, what would happen if I decided that every intimate or sexual experience brought me closer to my highest self, brought me closer to God? And that's really what especially the restorative and the transformational types of intimacy bring in. So setting that intention, coming back to the idea of intentional intimacy, setting the intention before going into a sexual experience of, what would I like to feel from this? Maybe it's not about, I want to have an orgasm, I want to squirt, I want to please my partner, which is all those things are awesome too. But there might be a deeper desire there that is life-giving or transformational.
I know. I was just talking to Justin today, and I was like, it doesn't always have to be about the finishing or whatever. And he was joking, and he was like, yes, it does. You know, but as men do, right? But it really, I think part of transforming is accepting like it can just be what it is in whatever moment, rather than all the other things that we've labeled it as, you know?
Yeah. If you're too focused on that one outcome, you might be missing a bunch of other magic. Like if you're so focused on just getting off, then you might miss like, oh, actually there's some emotion that wants to move through you and be released. And then you're going to have an even better orgasm on the other side. Yeah. Most of the time. That's been mine too. Absolutely. My experience.
Mine too. And it's been overcoming like the conditioning that I've had for so many years, you know, of being and plus, when you're primarily heterosexual and sleeping with a guy, then their priority is finishing, like and so yours kind of is too. You're like, okay, I guess that's what we're doing here.
Yeah. That's what we do.
That's what we do.
And it starts because, we grow up and we're told not to talk about sex, and we're told that it's not okay to touch your bodies, most of us, and not to have premarital sex. So we start to grow up when we have these urges and we want to explore our bodies, but we have to do it so secret and quiet and fast in the dark, and so we're learning that this is a thing that you do quickly, and you do it quietly, and you do it behind closed doors, and you do it at night, and it's like actually not necessary, and also potentially limiting the possibility of your experience.
Good. Men need to read this book.
Yes, men need to read this book for sure. Men, women.
I hope they will.
Everyone in between.
Yeah, everyone in between.
Everyone in between.
It just sounds so useful for men who get brainwashed by porn a little bit, you know?
Yep.
And then just they think their sexual blueprint or their erotic blueprint is just sexual,
Yep.
And there can be so much expansion there.
Expand your awareness. Part 2.
Expand your awareness. I mean, that's so incredibly important. So, what other tips do you have for expanding your awareness? Here's types of sex right here.
Yeah,
Chapter
look at
7.
you. You just went right in.
I did.
You went right in. Let's do a little go through types of sex.
Let's do.
So another big piece that I have in here is just like communication, honesty, how to approach consent. With all of these things, again, like we grow up with all of these like preconceived notions about our sexuality and what's okay and what's not okay. And so that makes it hard for us to figure out what we even want sexually. And I think we might have talked about this a little bit on the last.
I've talked about it ad nauseum for my audience, but yeah.
Yeah. So just briefly, it's like, I was someone that was like, what do you want? What do you want?
Me
so
too.
there's some tools in here about how to like get curious about like, what is your desire? And then how do you communicate that and explore it in a safe and consensual way? And how do you have intimacy where you're actually able to drop fully into your body? Because so often, again, we rush into intimacy and we don't think about the type of experience that we want to have. And then we also don't talk to them about what our boundaries are and our fears. And so then we're in our heads thinking, oh my God, I hope he doesn't, I'm not ready to actually have penetrative sex, but I don't want to stop the moment. And and it takes us away from being able to just feel because we're just in our heads.
Totally.
This podcast is sponsored by Wands. Wands creates luxurious pleasure practice tools that help people become more connected to their bodies. They have a huge selection of incredible items like yoni eggs, the most gorgeous crystal pleasure wands you've ever seen, free bleed blankets, and my favorites, the trademarked glass cervix wand and the Venus wand, which is their heaviest wand made of stainless steel, and their new ecstatic vibrator. This company is woman-owned and creates products designed to help you become more connected to your body and your pleasure and support the healing of pelvic pain. Get yours today in their always discreet packaging at wands.com. That's wands with 2 A's, WAANDS.com, and use my link in the show notes to get 10% off or enter the code Amy Edwards at checkout. Again, that's wands, WAANDS.com. The Amy Edwards Show is sponsored in part by Higher Dose. Higher Dose creates wellness tech for everyone with tools, supplements, and body care. And I have 15% off for you with my code MAGIC15. Higher Dose has been featured in Goop, Glamour, Elle, Vogue, Bazaar, Allure, and more. I have their infrared pulsed electromagnetic field, or PEMF mat, which emits electromagnetic waves that mimic natural frequencies found in nature, stimulating and encouraging your body's natural recovery process. It also has 20 pounds of crystals in it and has shown to ease chronic pain, aid in exercise recovery and circulation, deepen your meditations, reduce stress, and improve total body relaxation. I also love their red light face mask. It stimulates collagen, reduces fine lines, regenerates cells, and it's soft and easy to use and store and even travel with. I'm a true fan of these items and more, like their glow serum. So I'm excited to offer you 15% off using my code MAGIC15. Go to the show notes. You can click through on the link right there. Or if you go to Higher Dose, just enter the code MAGIC15 for 15% off. HigherDose.com. This podcast is sponsored by The Collective ATX. If you're looking for the best in hair extensions, it's The Collective ATX. They do mine, and I won't go anywhere else. I've tried them all over the years, and finally, I've found what makes my real hair stronger and fuller, and even works with my natural curl. They keep all their extensions in-house, so there's no wait, and they specialize in no damage to your natural hair like traditional hair extension methods. Plus, they're pros at color and covering gray. I have literally never in my life been happier with my color. They were named a top 200 salon by Salon Today in 2023. They've changed my hair journey. Let them change yours. The Collective ATX, link is in the show notes.
What are some of the tools?
Yeah, so one is just to get comfortable with knowing what that is for you, going into a date or into a sexual experience with a level of self-awareness of these are my hard boundaries for today. This is what I'm feeling open to. And maybe if it's someone that's new in your life and you are feeling like you're wanting to expand into that territory, having that conversation before you actually get into the bedroom. And there's a chapter of the book called Sexy Consent Skills, and I'll share some of those.
I love that.
Yeah, because like so often
much.
it's like it's awkward. Like people, it's like oh, I don't want to like make people, you know, think that I'm like assuming that we're gonna do something or. Like, I remember the first time a guy asked me what I like in bed, and I was like, why are you asking me? Like, you should just know. You must be bad if you need to ask me. And it was really just a projection of my own insecurity talking about these topics.
Yeah, because you if you probably were to just answer that to yourself, you probably didn't know, right?
Yeah, exactly. So what would it be like, you know, if it could be like a part of foreplay even, like if it could be a bit flirty, and there's some like demos of the conversation in the book. We also do them, you know, in person at our retreats and events, but approaching it from like, oh, you know, I really want to kiss you right now. Like how would that feel for you? And being like more proactive, but it's like really being in the energy of like an invitation and a sacred yes. And reading their language in return as well.
That's really lovely.
Yeah.
Do you address anything about like, so I have herpes, you know, and so that was something when I was dating. Well, I've had it since I was 19. So I have dealt with it, you know, dating back then, and I've run the gamut of reactions, but I was like, somebody didn't tell me. So I always would tell my partner, and cause I don't know who gave it to me. And I have a few suspicions, but I've gotten like just such a range of responses, and some quite, you know, uneducated, I would say. And then others are like, I have it too, you know, and I'm like, oh, well, when were you going to tell me that? Yeah. So, and some people just don't care at all. Yeah. And so do you have anything about like harder conversations?
So in part one of the book, I actually talk about herpes, and I talk about, you know, STIs in general and how they've, in my opinion, become another way to instill fear around, you know, sexuality.
I mean, yes.
Because herpes before the 80s, herpes was like no big deal. Like people, like it was like, there was some article that said something along the lines of, this is just like a part of humanity.
It really is.
It's
like almost like so many people have it. It's
for
like
sure.
This massive, crazy percentage.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like, if you went to the doctor, they would be like, oh, just like take a bath. And like, that's how you treat it. Then they found by accident, they found a medication that treats herpes. And then all of a sudden there was this like a massive smear campaign by New York Times and all of these big publications that say like herpes is the new, like is killing the one night stand and is this like new scarlet letter and just like making it out to be this like death sentence. And that's how I was raised to perceive it. I was perceived like this is something that you'll have for your entire life and so much shame. And
there have been people that have taken their own lives over it.
Yes. Yes. And that gives me chills because it's like, it's so sad and so unnecessary.
It breaks my heart.
It's so unnecessary. And yeah, in reality, you know, like, I think that like almost 20% of people have it and they don't even test you for it. Like if you go in for a typical panel, they won't test you for it because they don't, at this point, they just don't want to freak you out. Yeah. They will only test you for it if you actually have the symptoms showing, if you actually have a breakout, which a lot of people never have.
I know.
So like, and I say this in the book that it's like, I've never been tested for it. So I actually don't know because I've never had any symptoms.
Who knows?
But I could totally have it. Like it's very likely, you know? So, but I mean, even today, like after doing all the work that I've done in writing a book where I talk about these things, like I fear getting that diagnosis, not because of like the like literal effects on my body and my health, but just because of like, oh, like that would be uncomfortable to talk about. So yeah, it's super interesting.
Yeah. But the more we can educate people, like I think I remember the first time I encountered someone who was like he was a medical professional. He was my boyfriend. He became my boyfriend, but like he just understood it from a medical perspective and didn't care. And I was like, how refreshing, you know? And so it was really nice. The more we can educate people about like what you just said and that it's really not that big a deal. And it's actually really not. I mean, as somebody who's lived with it for like 30 something years, I'm okay. You know?
Yeah. It's really not a big deal.
My kids I didn't like pass it down when I gave birth, you know, like everything's all right. Everything's all right. So you go on to live a thriving life and thriving sex life even. So good. I'm glad because the more that can, even hard conversations.
Yeah. And I do talk a little bit later in the book about how to have safer sex conversations, you know, things that you might want to think about talking about, including sexual health, including pregnancy, and how to weave that into the conversation in a way that feels a little bit less like reading a laundry list and checking things off. Yeah. And I will say that it's like, it takes practice. It's uncomfortable at first very often, but generally speaking, people are very receptive to having these types of conversations and they're kind of relieved in a way. And again, like, it's like, either you're going to have that uncomfortable moment of having the conversation before getting intimate with someone, or you're going to find out down the line later, potentially something that is not what, like, you weren't able to make an empowered decision because you didn't have all the information. And then you're also probably likely going to be in your head in the intimate experience rather than in your body able to really experience, you know,
the worst.
The pleasure.
Get out of your head, you know, So I guess you do maybe give some tips on getting out of your head.
Yeah. Dropping into your body, getting into your head, slowing down. And also, especially the third part of the book is really about like, okay, now that you have some basic tools of, you know, understanding intention and intimacy, understanding what you want, how can you take this to the next level and really liberate? And we talk about things like, you know, sex magic and sacred surrender. And sacred surrender is such a powerful tool for dropping into your body.
What do you mean by sacred surrender?
What I mean by sacred surrender is to allow yourself to just be present and totally receive. And
I try to do that. Yeah.
Often
it's a practice.
It's a practice. And
total practice.
And in intimate settings, you can facilitate a sacred surrender with yourself, but it can also be very powerful to enroll someone in the mission, whether it be your partner or a professional dom or a tantrika or otherwise. And I think that when people think about surrender, they often think of like giving their power away. And it's like this, and I used to really hate the idea of surrender. And I also even wrapped it up into like my religious trauma around like, you need to surrender to God and this, you know, being in the sky. And now actually I feel like the surrender is about surrendering to my highest self, to my highest good, to the present moment, to my body. and it's actually like a gift. There's a researcher.
A gift to yourself.
It's a gift to yourself.
Yes.
It's a gift to yourself. And also, ultimately, it's a gift to the greater good, because when you do actually fully surrender and become really receptive and really feel, you oftentimes have that more restorative and transformative sex or intimacy. And then that, impacts your overall well-being, which then impacts everyone in your life as well.
Yes.
There's a researcher, Eva Krakow, I believe is her name. And she did a study that like we make like 35,000 decisions a day.
Mm-hmm.
So when we have an opportunity to like to turn that off,
The best.
we go into this like subspace and it's bliss and it's receptive and it's pure. And it's also this invitation to really feel and to also, go into your subconscious and explore more of who you are.
Cool.
And that's what's available with that, possibility of sacred surrender.
Sacred surrender. I love it. What's your concept of God?
What's my concept of God? Such a good question.
Is it too big? Is it too hard?
No, it's not too big. It's not too big. I'm feeling into...
Because if someone asked me that right now, I would have to be like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, when you ask that question, my heart just goes like, like really like expands and opens and gets like I'm looking around the room and I'm like, God is everywhere.
Yeah.
So I love shamanism and I love tantra. Those are the two like spiritual lineages that I really resonate with.
Yeah.
And what I love about both of them is that they are really empowering you to see God within yourself and also to see God in everything. And to make every moment a sacred moment. And Tantra, especially the lineages of Red Tantra, really invite you to find God in like the things that are hard to find God in.
Big time. So I'm a big proponent of this because if you're going to say God is everything, like a lot of religions do, guess what? That means everything.
Poop and sex.
And serial killers.
And yeah.
Yep. I mean, like that's where my mind goes, woo, okay. All right. How do we do it? How do we do it? And you just have to like really like expand a lot.
Yeah. And so it's easy to see God in like the flower. But what about the things that we've been told are, disgusting or damaging or wrong or whatever. And that's a practice. And is a practice that, I am not even near mastering. And there's also this practice too in godliness that involves discernment. So knowing that there's no right or wrong, good or bad necessarily, but being able to attune to yourself and what is intentionally going to bring you closer to your inner godliness. And that being the determination of what is not right or wrong, but what is bringing you closer to that, to your inner God. And that's discernment to me.
That resonates with me a lot because it is that letting go of judgment around it all, and like getting very aligned with your own authenticity or voice or discerning your truth, whatever that is.
Exactly. And in the book, this is related to your last question and the question before, which was dropping into your body. And then also, what does God mean to you? Every chapter ends with like a practice. So,
I noticed that. And I love that.
The sacred surrender one actually has two. And one of them is God is my Dom.
I love that.
Some of them are more embodied, like pleasure practices. Some of them are like, energetic exercises or journal prompts or maybe conversations that you would have with someone.
Oh, I opened that page. God is my Dom.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Because like, I mean, we can make it too serious sometimes. I just feel like with God, and like God would be the greatest comedian. I mean, come on.
Oh, for sure. God is like laughing.
I know. God is my Dom. Very nice. Set an intention, awaken your Eros, merge intention with Eros at climax. Okay, hold on. This is in sacred surrender, right?
Yep.
At climax, especially as you orgasm and immediately after, ask the universe or your higher self or God what matters most. Rather than focusing on an outcome you desire, like you would in sex magic, allow yourself to become receptive, surrendering to something higher moving through you.
And I can share
I like that.
ways that I've done this practice before. I actually kind of did this on accident last week. So I was doing a sex magic ritual and I was like, I want to do this around my business. You know, I'm about to launch this book. I want the book to blow up. I want a bunch of new people coming into this world and into this work. And, you know, oftentimes, you know, in sex magic, they'll kind of, or in manifesting in general, they're like, be very specific. What exactly do you want? And so I'm thinking, okay, like I'd like to sign 2 new clients this month and I want my book to be a bestseller. And I'm like being very particular. And it just like wasn't doing it for me. Like I wasn't getting turned on. I wasn't getting off on it. And as soon as I shifted to, I want to surrender to whatever the highest impact is in this moment for this work and this book. And I want to really connect to that. Like I imagined the impact, like exploding. Like I was like, I'm surrendering to you, God. I'm just the vehicle for this. I'm just the vehicle for this to come through. What does it look like? And I just saw it come through me and then expand out. And that was a version of me surrendering and being receptive and opening to God and letting it be, not focusing on the particular thing, which is helpful at times.
Yes, but it's not true surrender because
not.
You're trying to control the outcome and you've decided this is the right outcome. That's why with vision boards and things, we can get too attached to this something, and that's not the surrender that we're looking for.
Yeah. And so when people think of surrender, I think a lot of the time they think like, oh, I'm giving my power away, or like
it's letting go of control. It's scary.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But it's also knowing that you're the one doing it. You're the one that's consciously handing your power to someone or something that you trust for a greater good for you and potentially for the world in the process.
Boom.
And I think that like also when people think about doming and surrendering and all that, it's like, oh, like all like leather and like aggressive and like it's gonna hurt. And like it can actually be like also power play and dom is like, you know, daddy energy and like connecting to like a more nurturing archetype and surrendering to that as well.
Ooh, daddy energy. I like that. Yes. Yeah. And just to, I had another question about sex magic. Oh, I know. I was just rereading. I'm rereading Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza.
Oh, okay.
And he's talking about electromagnetic energy and when we pair our feelings with our intentions and how that, you know, creates that quantum magnetism. Yeah. But I started thinking about it in a sexual context, and that is that's kind of what you're talking about here too, is that that orgasmic state, because I was like, that's got to be an electromagnetic.
Oh yeah. I mean, it is to me, it's the OG. It's the OG electric magnetic field. This is the most powerful energy because it created you. Like this energy created every single person that has ever existed. This energy has created every single animal, every single plant. I mean, looking around us now, and I actually like say this like very close to the beginning of the book. If you look around you now, like seriously, everything you see was either directly created by this energy or was created by someone or something that was created by this energy. So down the line, so then you notice like our entire reality is like formulated in a way by this sexual life force energy. Yes. So if you can tap into that creative power and realize, and in Tantra, it's like every sexual experience, including masturbation, is procreative. If you're not actively, you know, intending to conceive a child, what else could you direct that energy towards? And it could be towards a physical thing. It could be towards an energetic thing. It could be towards, I actually just want to completely surrender to my purpose and my dharma just flooding through me and I want to get out of my own way. It could be, I actually really want something, but I keep trying to manifest it and it's not happening. And I want to know what the block is. And then the universe might provide you with some awareness around what's getting in your own way. So there's so many ways that you can work with this.
Yeah. What do you say to people? Like, I think Miley Cyrus said a while back that she was just in an asexual period, you know? And I don't like to limit. I mean, maybe creativity comes in different ways for different people at different times, of course.
Yeah.
But what would you say to someone that was feeling that way?
Yeah.
And feeling maybe not in touch with it at this particular time?
Yeah. So I will first want to say that the book is for you if you're asexual as well, if you identify that way.
No matter where you are on the spectrum.
Yeah. Yes. And I do offer a suggestion of a asexual book. I can't remember the name of it right now. Let me see if I can, if I have it right at the beginning. I have it at the beginning of the book.
But one of your references is how herpes.
I don't think that it's in my references section actually. Feel free to DM me or get the book, and the reference is in here. But there are really great teachers out there that specifically focus on asexuality, and this is not necessarily like if you're asexual. However, this is really great for understanding if your asexuality might be even coming from some disconnection to your sexuality and reorienting yourself to sexuality from a more empowering, honest, and pleasure-based way.
I love that.
So that's one thing to consider about it. And another thing is, even if you're asexual, very often you're going to interact with people that aren't. And having this as a tool in your tool belt to understand can be really empowering as well. I personally have not really connected with asexuality in this lifetime. It hasn't been something that I've experienced directly. But, I think for asexuality, there are so many other ways to experience our life force as well, and getting really curious about that too. Because it's the turn on isn't just sexual. The turn on happens, the aliveness happens when you eat a really great piece of food, or you're dancing, or you're in your body. And that's something to be curious about as well, if you're moving from that energy.
Yeah. Okay. Well said.
Yeah.
What is one of your very favorite things about your creation?
What is one of my very favorite things? I think that the spectrum of what it can create is one of my favorite things. Because, as we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, it's my belief that this type of education around sexuality and having this be a movement that really takes over, has the power to potentially make, sexual violence virtually disappear. And
what a dream.
Yes.
Oh, let's just hold that vision. Yes.
Yes. And it also empowers you to have really amazing sex. So it's like two really great things,
wonderful outcomes.
Yes. Yes. I stepped into this work. I made the decision actively, I went from being on the tantric path as a receiver of the wisdom to being a leader when I went to India. Did we talk about this in the first podcast?
Probably, but let's go ahead and talk about it again.
I went to India to work with a nonprofit that freed children from sex trafficking.
Oh my gosh.
Which was very near and dear to my heart because of my own experience with, sexual violence, and also, the beautiful history of East Asia. And so yeah, I was doing some copywriting for this organization, and they invited me to come to India to work on this documentary that they were doing that was meant to spread awareness and raise funds. And my role, it was so incredible.
So amazing.
My role was to create the storyline and to really bring out the truth from the story and from the people we were working with. So I was interviewing survivors. I was interviewing police officers, social workers, the founders of the organization. We went on a raid and we freed 4 girls. It was an incredible experience.
Wow.
And my truth was, wow, this is great. We're, arresting the bad guys and we're freeing the innocent. But are we getting to the root? Where is this demand coming from? Why do people feel that the only way that they're going to have their desires and even their needs met is by raping children? And I knew from my own work in this world that this ethos addressed that, addressed the demand, and could reorient people to their sexuality from a really, again, empowering and healing way. And that's when I was like, I got to do this. I got to do this professionally. People, even the founders weren't seeing that connection.
Yeah.
and again, they're doing amazing work. I donate to them every year. That's one of the things I do when I'm like launching a new thing. It's like, okay, if I hit this goal, I'm donating this amount. They're great. The organization is called Marici, Marici, which is the Buddhist goddess of dawn. So bringing light.
Oh,
yeah.
wow. Bringing light to those people. And
Yeah.
yes, but there always is a deeper root, you know, if we're willing to just take a minute, you know, like we can always go deeper and try to, I don't know, get to the source and help heal that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really incredible and good for you. I mean, I think you had that work for a reason.
I did. There were a few like key moments and they all happened within like really like a month and a half period. Maybe I could say 6 months if I wanted to, like there was like a before period and after period, but yeah, it was that. And then it was a particular friend that really was like, you need to teach this. I talk about that in the book as well.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What did this unearth that really surprised you besides the coercion that, you know, you felt like responsible for?
You mean just the journey or the book writing itself?
Either one, whatever.
What else did it unearth for me? I think that, you know, I was already, before I, again, stepped into the work professionally, I was already on the journey. I was in the work for 5 years, just learning and healing my relationship to my body. And that was all great and fine and well. But stepping into it professionally is a whole other experience because I knew that this was going to be important for the world and impactful. And even though I knew that, I was still terrified to do the work professionally. And even now I'm like, okay, like it's one thing. I've been in this work for, 5-6 years and I've been talking about it online. I've been doing all the things, but it's completely different to put it into a living, breathing book for some reason. So what it's taught me is like, there's always another step in the journey. There's always another deepening into the practice of sharing this truth and being radically honest and vulnerable in the process. So yeah, that's what I've learned.
That's so cool. It's so cool. I mean, my gosh, I'm glad that you realized that there was more that you need to say because now you can write a new book.
Yeah. Yep.
Whenever you're ready.
Yep.
I mean, no rush, right? Like take a breath from this one first. But
how many books do you have?
2.
Okay.
One's a novel and one's a children's book. So
amazing.
Yeah. And I mean, I think they took me years and years, like the children's book took like 5 years. The novel, I would write and then put it down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it took like 12 years total. So they take a while.
They do. They do.
Yeah, and that's okay. But I'm working on a new one now.
What's the new one?
That's more about, personal development and self-help.
Okay, nice.
Creating a life of overflow and practices. I know, right?
Yeah, that's you. That is she.
Yeah, because I'm starting this water bottle company too. So that's, I don't know if I've told you about that.
No.
So, yes. So that's a whole nother thing. So we'll get into that later.
Okay, cool.
Yes. But I mean, sexual reclamation or whatever we want to call it, or claiming your sexuality and claiming who you really are is a big part of that for me, know, and that is part of my work too, in a holistic way, Yep.
Mm-hmm. And how you do one thing is how you do everything. If you can have the hard conversations and share your desires and claim what you really, really want when you're most vulnerable, which for so many of us is when we're naked in the bedroom with another person, then you can do it anywhere. If you can ask for, someone to tie you up, then you can ask your boss for a raise. If you can honor, your own body and your own boundaries in the bedroom, then you can set boundaries with your family. If you can invite someone into their greatest pleasure and ask them what they really want, then you can get the fresh tomatoes on your sandwich instead of the slimy ones at Subway. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's everything it overflows, and it also overflows from a place of yes and yum rather than from a place of entitlement too, which I find. Mm-hmm. So
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Good stuff.
What are you still learning right now?
So the lesson of life in this moment is, how do I sum this up?
I don't know.
Well, okay, so I'll first say there's two things I actually want to come through. One I will say is I'm newly married. We had we're about to get married the last time I came on. It's been about a year. And that has been a whole journey of learning about myself in relationship. Like the self-development that you do on your own is amazing, but it only applies like 10% to life partnership. Like you've got to do like a whole other set.
Yeah.
So that's been a thing that I'm learning is partnership. And I think that that's going to be the New Earth Intimacy book is like
I love it.
Bringing those learnings. So that's at least a few more years down the line because there's a lot of learning left to do. But we've learned so much in 1 year. I'm like, wow. My husband and I, we were actually at the dog emergency room last night.
Oh, no.
Yeah. My dog got into like the fire pit and like ate a bunch of like things that had been like a steak that like had been burned. Like and she like, threw up all over. So anyways, we had to go to the emergency room.
She was having a good time.
And we were like, we're doing this so well. Like in the past, and like I was having a lot of things come up. My dog had died a year. I was like,
I remember. That was when we met.
Yeah. So I was like in a process about that. I was also like processing past times where we've had health issues and he didn't show up perfectly. And now he is showing perfectly and having resentment that he didn't in the past. And like, just like putting it all out there and being like, this is the truth of the moment. Yeah. And he held it so great. And it was like, wow. Like we woke up to him, we're like, we did really good yesterday. Like that was hard, but we like really, we did
good
that.
To celebrate that together.
Yeah.
Yeah. And recognize it.
Yeah. And I share some really vulnerable stories about him in this book too. And like, he was the first person that read the book and he was like, I struggled to read some of those chapters, but I'm really happy that you shared what you did and you shared it in the way that you did. And I was like, oh, babe. Because like he could veto anything. I would be like, anything you want to veto, we can veto. But he didn't veto a single thing. He was like,
he just let you.
Yeah. Because I mean, I honor him in it. And also he showed up. Like he, you know, yeah. So
I mean, he knows who he married.
Yeah, and I also own the things that I was like, that I was not. I was the bad guy in the book too, both in our relationship and in other relationships as well.
Yeah. So Justin doesn't really listen to this podcast, so it's great because then I can just kind of say what I need to say. Sometimes I'm like, okay, he won't listen to that. I'll just go ahead and tell that story.
I won't tell him.
I know, but it is. I mean, you know, it's also him honoring you and allowing you to be who you need to be in this moment and tell the stories you need to tell. So, which is a really beautiful thing in a relationship. And that's part of the evolution of it. I mean, as somebody who's been divorced twice, I get it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not for everyone to share the hard pieces, especially while you're in it. But for us, I feel like we both feel clear that it's a part of our soul like process and dharma to do that, to help other people. Nice. It's not everyone's thing. But for us, we're like, we're going to share the real, raw, and the messy. Not always when it's alive, like usually on the other side.
And sometimes it takes lots of time.
Yeah.
Like I know that there's things that Justin and I haven't shared publicly that our friends know and stuff, but like it's just we're not there. It doesn't need to be, you know, there's some things you can still hold. And even though I talk about almost everything, you know, there's still some things, right?
Absolutely.
And that's okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So back to the book. It sounds like you did a lot of research.
I did do a bit of research. Yeah.
I am
especially
impressed.
For the first part is, I wouldn't say research heavy, but it's just like, hey, let's just address anything shadow oriented that could be keeping you from like, because you can only expand and liberate as far as you've shown the light inside yourself and addressed like, hey, this was my sexual education. These were my first sexual experiences that may or may not have been damaging or empowering. And once you start to say, okay, like here are the pieces that might, you know, show up in my journey, then you can really go deeper with the liberation and the expansion pieces.
Good.
And it becomes more comfortable.
Yeah.
You know, because you've addressed the stuff. Like so many people, you know, they step into tantra, shamanic sexuality, they go on their retreats, whatever. And there's just so much that's still contracted and like that they haven't worked through that it's like, it's almost overwhelming. So it can be good to just like get a good read of, you know, what's operating there.
For sure.
And to also understand like, hey, here's some things that happened in religion that might, have impacted you. And some, stats. I talk about the Council of Nicaea in here, which is like when Christianity took the world by storm, and how that might be impacting you today. So like really weird, random things too.
That's cool. Yeah. I love it. And just about liberation, like what I was talking about earlier, what I was kind of getting around to saying, but I got sidetracked, was, and this is a better time for it, was I've been thinking, I was listening to Michael Singer talk about it the other day, and love and the liberation you can feel when you just operate from love without any expectations.
Yeah.
And I have done a lot of Byron Katie, the work where you ask, is this true? Can I really know that to be true? How, let's see, what's the third one? Do you remember?
I know of the work, but I haven't experienced it personally.
But the final one is always like, how would I feel if I could never think this thought again? Right. And every single time I go free, liberated, you're completely liberated. And so it relates to literally everything. And so when you think about all these things that we've been taught, like if you really let it go with your own judgments and how you feel about it. And, the third question is, how does it make me feel when I think this thought? And so many times it's like, this.
Yeah.
And then how would I feel if I could never think it again? It's that breath. It's that audible sigh. It's that freedom. And really, I love that you end with that, because that is what it's about. It's about this liberation, and sexual liberation can look like whatever for anybody.
Yep.
But it's that letting go of all these other things.
Yeah, it's this process of self-awareness where you get curious about, okay, I have all these beliefs, thoughts, feelings around this part of my life.
Yeah.
And are they actually true for me, or is it someone else's truth that I took on? And there's no right or wrong answer. You could be like, actually, I want to keep this one. And I really align with this particular belief about whatever. Or it could be, you know what? I actually don't know, and I'm going to explore that. Or it could be, absolutely not. I actually don't believe that, and I don't know why I enrolled in that. Why was that?
Right.
And even a frustration of like, God, I can't believe I believed that for so long, or I let that rule my experience for so long. And there's a forgiveness ritual in here specifically.
Really?
Yeah, there's a rage ritual. So get angry about what, let yourself get angry about what happened to you, what you were taught, etc. And then that's
so interesting.
There's a forgiveness ritual as well
for sex education.
Yep.
Those are not things that we were ever taught.
No.
Forgiveness, rage, and allowing all these emotions.
Yeah. Can you forgive yourself for believing the thing, or not saying no when you meant to, or whatever. So
we're all just doing the best we can in the moment.
Yes, you do your best until you know better, and then you do better,
and then you do better,
and then you do better.
Yeah, absolutely. What have we missed talking about the book? What else do we need to talk about?
I feel like we did a pretty good run of it, honestly.
Are there some practices, sexual practices with a partner? Yeah.
So a lot of them, I will put an option of, hey, you can do this with a partner. You can do this with someone you feel safe with. So yeah, that's it. Certain ones have that, certain ones don't. Yeah. So yeah, this one says this can be done as a solo or partnered ritual. That one's called a pleasure prayer.
I saw that one.
Yeah.
What is a golden shadow?
Yeah. So your golden shadow. So okay, first
let's talk about. There's a chapter on this.
Yes.
Anybody?
There is a chapter on the golden shadow. So oftentimes when we talk about shadow work, it feels heavy and dark, and that's really what
I'm so over it.
Yeah, I mean it's so important. Yes. You got to do it, and there can be a fun side of your shadow too, called the golden shadow. And oftentimes,
did you make that up, or is it a thing?
I don't think I made that up. I'm pretty sure that
I've never heard it
elsewhere. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so your shadow is the parts of yourself, and Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, does a lot of work on the shadow. That's where I get a lot of my philosophy on the shadow. But so the shadow is the part of yourself that there's some part of it that's you're not resonating with, so you're actively disowning it and not integrating it into your life. And so very often these are beliefs and conditionings that, again, are no longer serving us, or judgments that we're projecting onto others, etc. But the golden shadow could also be golden nuggets, like things that you had no idea that you were your special sauce or trick or whatever. And I'll give a non-sexual example first, just because I think it makes it easy to understand. And then I'll give my personal example.
Okay.
So non-sexual example, let's say that you really have a gift for music. And so as a kid, you're like singing around the house all the time. But then one day, maybe your mom's in a bad mood and she lashes out. And she's like, be quiet, go to your room. Maybe you sing off key one time and you're like, oh, that was bad. And so then suddenly you don't want to sing anymore and you shut that down. And, for years and years and years, you hide that gift. And it's because you maybe you're afraid of, again, the rejection, or maybe you're afraid of attention, unwanted attention, whatever. And so you hide that. And then later in life, you realize like, oh my God, I've surrounded myself and go to concerts all the time. I'm now a music manager maybe, and it's like, oh, probably that's a shadow piece that's wanting to come out, this hidden gift that you have of actually being a musical artist and a creator in that way. So that's it.
I love that.
That's a non-sexual example.
Yes.
For me, I had this golden shadow of being a pleasure priestess, right? Like I had, from a young age, I had this curiosity around sexuality and aliveness, but it wasn't okay. I knew that it was bad. I knew that it was wrong. So I was very
let's put those in quotes.
Yeah. Yeah. That was my conditioning. Oh, it's bad. I can't, no.
Yeah.
So it was in the dark. I didn't explore that. I minimized it. And then, over as I started to learn more Tantra and shamanic sexuality and bring that into my life, into my relationships, and get positive feedback and even create transformation for people, it was like, oh, I'm actually really good at this. And starting to excavate that and be in practice of it. So there's a chapter here about how, you could have, a secret talent in this way or world with sexuality, or even that your desires could have a golden element to them in a way.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes. Rather than, shaming and hiding them in the shadows, essentially. Aw, I love it. I wonder if I have any. I probably do.
You definitely do. And you probably have many that you've already brought to light as well.
I think I do. Yes.
And that's in the liberate your arrows part. So that's where we really get into the fun, juicy, yummy stuff.
Good. Yeah. Do you do the very basic sex ed in here too? This is a penis?
No, this is not a dire. That's a great question. And I addressed at the beginning of the book. This is not for you if you're I want to know about the sexual parts necessarily, but I do give some great resources. Those are definitely in very clearly in the resources section.
Oh, cool. That's good. I love that you have all these references for the things that you like. So if somebody wants to turn to that, they can.
Yeah. So for sexual anatomy and technique, I recommend The Woman's Anatomy of Arousal. Have you read that?
No.
By Winston Cherry. It's a great book.
I actually have heard of it.
And then for men, I put here The Multi-Orgasmic Man.
I have that.
Which is a good book. It's a little bit more didactic than how I like to teach on sexual anatomy or, sacred sexuality. But it's there's some great tools.
What does didactic mean?
So it's they'll be
I should know that, but I don't.
I might even be using the word wrong. Who knows?
I don't care. I don't care.
But we'll get really clear for anyone that's curious. I'm not going to give the definition of didactic, but what I mean is in the book, so that the multi-orgasmic man is geared towards men and people that have penises.
Yes.
And so he says things like, if you're of this age, you should only ejaculate this many times a month. So it's very strict.
God.
Or
Okay.
he'll be stroke 7 times and then take a deep breath, which is it's a great tool. I actually really have used those tools. It's awesome. But it can feel a little bit more prescriptive. Maybe that's a better word.
Yeah.
And it's hey, read the book.
Instructional too. It's 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. And then what can happen with that at times is that then you're really in your mind again and you're not in your body. So what can be powerful with, those more prescriptive practices is to read them, try it out, see how it feels, and then start to build trust with your body that you're just going to do it naturally so that you're not in your head so much thinking and just it's like building the reps. Suddenly you become more efficient with the practice because you're not trying to do it right. You just kind of know, and then it becomes easier. And also everyone's body is different. So maybe for you, it's 6 breaths and not 7. You know what I mean? So you start to just like build this trust. And I also talk about that trusting yourself. That's
Good.
in the first.
Excellent advice. I've done that myself.
Yeah.
In different pleasure practices and things like that. So
yeah, chapter 5, trusting
yourself. Trust yourself, you guys.
Because we're taught, trust the process, trust your parents, trust your teachers, trust science, trust religion, which all have their place and are incredible resources for various things. But my intention in this book and overall in my work is for you to trust yourself first. To utilize all of these external resources, milk them for what they're worth, but always trust yourself. And also learning the difference between what is your intuition and what is your instinct. Because very often we think that those things are the same thing. Sometimes they are. Yeah. But your instinct, like it's like, listen to your gut, right? People think that's your intuition, but it's actually not. Your gut is here. That's your survival. That's your instinct. And so your instinct is there to help you survive, which is great. Like we absolutely need that. But sometimes if we're listening to our instinct, it is applying past realities and experiences and saying something like this happened in the past, so you need to do the same thing you did last time to survive, rather than, hey, we have this data from the past, let's be aware of that, but can we make an even more empowering decision based on our intuition that will not only help us survive but also thrive?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, such a good distinction. And absolutely. Okay, so what else? Anything else we didn't cover that you really wanted to cover today or really wanted to talk about in your book? The pressure, I know.
We did so well. I'm gonna scroll through because you found a couple when we were going through. So I'm like, okay, is there anything else that could be really juicy for people? I'm
so impressed, Leola. Great job with this. It looks just beautiful and it doesn't look difficult to read at all.
Thank you.
I like your fonts.
Thanks.
And I know, yeah.
One I could just touch on briefly is relating styles.
Okay.
So, this is a part of the second part of the book. So expanding your awareness, like, hey, here's a menu of what's available to you. You were given a template that was monogamy most likely. And, if we look at the statistics, monogamy isn't necessarily working for everyone.
Right.
And that's for many reasons, not because polyamory is better by any means, because I don't think that it's for everyone. But hey, there are all these other different relating styles, and maybe there are different chapters of your life that may work for you with all these relating styles. So I have this like menu in here. I talk about, everything from the like super polyamory all the way to monogamy.
I saw this.
Things like monogamish, which is how my husband and I identify.
Is it this right here?
Yeah. So this is actually, this chart is a great resource. It's not mine. It's from Jessica Fern's book Polysecure, which is a great book if you're curious about open relating of any kind. She basically applies open relating to the attachment styles.
Okay.
Which is incredible. But yeah,
wow,
so she's got this great chart that shows like here's the most sexually exclusive types of relating, such as monogamy. Here's the least sexually exclusive, such as, relationship anarchy and solo polyamory. And then you have emotional exclusivity and low emotional exclusivity. And it kind of shows you where these different types of relating styles land on the map. And then I give a brief definition of each one of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
What the hell? Relationship anarchy. Just anything goes.
Yeah, and asexual is here too. So yeah, it gives you a good like visual of understanding that this is a fluid decision. It's not black and white. It's not right or wrong either.
Yes.
And just getting curious. And I also talk about, how to choose the right relating style for you. That's the very next section after that. So, to me, monogamy isn't the best way. Polyamory isn't the best way. It's, again, what's best for you, using that discernment and finding what's the most godly. And my husband and I, we've haven't gone quite the whole spectrum, but we've explored different ways of being in that in different chapters for different relating styles. But yeah, monogamy can feel the most sacred and empowering for you, especially if you feel like going really deep with one person and putting all of your energy and focus in that one direction is going to bring you closer to your higher self. But there's also a shadow to monogamy, which is doing it from a place of, fear that your partner is going to fall in love with someone else, or, having a really anxious attachment style potentially. And oftentimes it's both. You'll be in monogamy for the more light, empowered intention. And also there'll be a little bit of shadow in there. I have that. I definitely there's definitely a Leola inside me that's like, I don't want my husband being with other women because what if he leaves me? And there's ways to work with that.
Yeah.
Right. And then polyamory can be really sacred and empowering if you feel like, I feel like the sexuality is alive within me and it's so beautiful and sacred, and I want to share it with as many people as I feel called to, and just trust that when I have that chemistry with someone, it's because I have a sacred contract with them and I want to feel like I'm in a relationship that honors that. But there's also the shadow of polyamory, which is fear of commitment and, not wanting to really even go deep within yourself and just have all of this surface level connection as well. And I go much deeper into that in the chapter as well.
Have you read The Truth by Neil Strauss?
I have.
So good.
I have.
Such an interesting book.
He had one before that.
Yeah.
The Game.
The Game.
I didn't read The Game.
I didn't either.
I read The Truth.
And
it was good. It was interesting because The Game is all about pickup techniques, and it's quite immature in its expression.
Yeah.
Whereas in The Truth, he basically says everything that I said in The Game is immature.
Yeah.
And he owns it. He totally owns it, which I have mad respect for. And then kind of shares his journey with, open relating and then choosing monogamy for a bit. I haven't read the book in 6 years, but
yeah, I read it a few years back, but I thought it was really interesting.
It is. It's super interesting. And even more interesting is, so he ended up withdrawing all of the open relating stuff and the game stuff because he met an amazing woman. And he talks about that in the book, and falling in love and choosing monogamy and starting a family. But then they end up getting divorced.
I know. I saw that they got divorced a year or two ago, and I was like, no.
Yeah. And yeah.
Shit, we need a new book. What happened?
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is it's yes, I feel that damn, how has it evolved though? And it's such a testament. I've never spoken to him. I haven't read his book for 6 years, but if I were to intuit or guess or even make a projection of what's going on, it's again, sometimes life changes and there's different chapters for different relating styles. And before I met my husband, I went through a solo polyamory experiment.
Oh, yes. I remember you telling me about this.
Yeah. Which involved dating lots of people, but also really wanting emotional depth with those people. But I intentionally chose solo polyamory so that I could have my desires for intimacy met, but also just focus on myself and my relationship to myself for a while. That's what solo poly is. It's saying I am my own primary partner for now, at least. But some people choose that as their...
I think I did that.
Yeah.
I didn't realize I was,
unconsciously.
But I did.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Well, anyway, I don't even think that I have really registered that it's called relating styles. So that's good for me. I don't know what I was calling it, but I was kind of just lumping it in with bisexual or whatever, I don't know, rather than calling it its own category of relating. Right?
Yeah. And so, a lot of people are like, what's the difference between solo polyamory and just being a player, basically, and just trying to sleep with as many people as possible? For me, the difference is the intention and also how you communicate this. So when you can tell someone on a first date, hey, right now I'm in a season of solo polyamory, or I've actually decided that this is probably how I'm going to spend the rest of my life, you're giving them information that empowers them to feel like a full fuck yes to engaging with you sexually or not, so that you don't get in those sticky situations of well, I didn't know that I'm looking for a serious relationship, or I want or whatever. So it's empowering just to say, hey, and that's one of the things I say, regardless of what relating style you're choosing, get comfortable with saying, this is what I'm choosing, or even, I don't know what I'm choosing. Yeah. And I'm in a stage of exploring, and this is what I'm curious about.
Yeah.
So you give people an opportunity, because other people are really clear and they don't want to waste their time. And other people are like, wow, I didn't even know I could do that.
Yeah.
That's evidence for me. I can have a exploratory season.
Yeah. So. Nothing's written in stone.
Yeah.
No, you don't have to say this is what I'm deciding forever.
Unless you want to, unless you're like, I'm writing in stone. I am marrying this person and being with them forever. And that's that.
I guess.
And
I don't know. Yeah. I guess.
And maybe it does stay that way. And hopefully it does, if that's what you want. I'm like, you do you.
Yes, you're
you
right.
Do you. I'm going to
you.
give you the tools, but you do you, girlfriend or boyfriend or
friend.
Dude friend.
Just friend. Yeah.
Dad friend, mom friend, friend.
Yes. Oh, good. Well, have we covered what we need to cover? When can people get this book in their hands?
July 8th. And I believe that this episode is going to come out a couple days later.
Yep,
right?
it is. So
once this is out, you can get it.
Yes.
You can get it on Amazon. Type in Sacred
So
Sex
get
Ed.
it.
Or go to, you also get some bonuses. When you buy the book, you go to my website, talktantratome.com/book, and there's some freebies there, including a free launch party that you'll get access to.
Awesome.
Where you can ask me questions and we'll do some of the practices from the book. You'll also get a free month in my membership called the Higher Love Club.
Nice.
Yeah, some really, really juicy things.
That is
for
awesome.
You when you purchase.
Yes, people could get some time with you. That is amazing. And I'm just so happy for you. And I just can't say enough good things. Thank you for coming to share about this, because I wanted to raise your voice and awareness about all your good work. And you're just so incredibly studied and intelligent and good at expressing what needs to be expressed. So
I'm doing my best. Thank you.
Of course you
Thank
are.
you for seeing me.
Yes, and it is incredible.
Thank you for bringing this conversation forth. It means the world. I do I've been reaching out to lots of people to talk about the book, and there's these moments where I'm like, oh, I sometimes feel like there's an extra level that I have to move through because of the edginess, because of the taboo. And it's it's so nice when someone's like, yes, I am ready for this. My audience is ready for this. Yes. I feel like the world is ready for it and desperately needs it, but it can be edgy.
It can be. Yes, so. But here's to pushing those edges.
Yes. That's a chapter of the book, pushing your edges.
Pushing your edges.
And that's one that we didn't talk about.
Cheers our books. Cheers.
Yes.
Our books, and everyone go get this. Thank you, Leola.
Thank you,
I just love you so much. So much. So everyone go get this. Sacred Sex Ed, Leola. I will put a link in the show notes, of course. So it's going to be really easy for you to support Leola too. And I mean, $22 to get all this information and some wonderful practices. So we just, hit the tip of the iceberg, I felt like today. So thank you so much for being here and showing up for yourself every time in these conversations, because it is where real change begins. It is so incredible to keep rising together and know that we don't have to do anything special. You can surrender to the moment, surrender to what is happening right now, what you're being shown, and who knows where it will lead, and just allowing that is so cool, right? So cool. I love you so much. Thank you for being here. Rate, review, subscribe, all the things to the show. If you can go on Apple Podcasts and write a review or just hit the 5 stars, that would mean so much to me. I always look at them. And so thank you so much for being here. Subscribe to the newsletter too. It's at amyedwards.info or amyedwards.com. And I love you so much. Keep just shining your head off. I love you. Till next time.
This has been the Amy Edwards Show from Overcome Studios. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe. And thank you so much for being here. Sign up for our newsletter at amyedwards.com.